A 20-year-old girl is pressing herself against a library wall while the city burns around her. 3 days ago, she was copying Persian poetry by lamplight, arguing with her father about the movement of stars. 3 days ago, Samarkand was the center of the world. Now the gates are broken. The screaming has started, and 100,000 Mongol warriors are pouring through the streets like a flood that doesn't stop. Her name is Aisha. She's a scholar's daughter. She speaks 3 languages and can calculate the movements of planets in 4 hours. She'll be standing in a line while men count her teeth. In 4 days, she'll be given to a Mongol officer as a reward for killing her neighbors. In 4 months, she'll be pregnant with a child she didn't choose, in a land she's never seen, speaking a language she's still learning. This is Samarkand, March 1220, and for the women of this city, what comes next won't be death. Death would have been quick. Death would have been mercy. What the Mongols did to them was slower, calculated, designed to erase not just their lives, but their identities, their bloodlines, their memory of who they once were. This is the story of 3 women who survived the fall of Samarkand. None of them will die in this video. What happens to them is worse. The first soldiers through the library door don't look at the books, they look at Aisha. One of them grabs her father Rahman by the beard. He's 58 years old, the most respected astronomer in Central Asia. Men traveled from Baghdad to study with him. The soldier doesn't care. He sees an old man. Old men are worthless. He draws his sword. Wait, the voice comes from behind. Another soldier, older, with more authority. He's looking at Rahman's hands, soft hands, scholar's hands. Can you read? He asks in broken Persian. Rahman nods. Can you write? Another nod. Then you live. He turns to his men. This one goes to the conscribes. He has value. Aisha exhales. Her father will survive. But the officer isn't finished. He's looking at her now. Whose daughter? Mine, Rahman says quickly. She assists my work. She can read, write, calculate. She's young. The officer cuts him off. She's healthy. She goes to the sorting. Rahman's face crumbles. Please, she's all I have. My wife is dead. My sons died defending the walls. She goes to the sorting. 2 soldiers grab Aisha's arms. She doesn't scream. She's watched enough women scream in the last 3 hours to know it doesn't help. Her father reaches for her. Their fingers touch for half a second before she's pulled away. She never sees him again. But here's what she doesn't know yet. Her father will survive. He'll be marched 1,200 miles across deserts and mountains, chained to other scholars, sleeping in the dirt. He'll die somewhere in the Taklamakan desert, reciting poetry in a language his captors don't understand. Aisha won't learn this for years. By then, she won't remember his face clearly, just his hands reaching for her. Just that half second of contact before they pulled her away. Let me explain what the sorting was. When the Mongols took a city, they didn't kill randomly. They processed. Every human being was evaluated, categorized, assigned a purpose. Men who could fight were executed. Men who could build, smith, or craft were chained and marched east. Old men and young boys were usually killed unless they had specific skills. Women were sorted differently. Age, health, beauty, virginity. Each factor changed your value. Each factor determined whether you'd be given to a common soldier, sold to a merchant, or kept for someone important. Aisha was dragged to what had been the great plaza of Samarkand 2 days ago. Merchants sold silk here. Poets recited verses. Children played in fountains. Now it was a processing center. Thousands of women stood in lines. Mongol officers walked between them, examining, selecting, marking. The beautiful ones were pulled to one side, the skilled ones to another. The rest, the old, the sick, the difficult, were pushed toward a third group. Aisha didn't know what happened to the third group. She found out that night when she heard the screaming stop. Here's the detail that changes everything. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't soldiers out of control. This was policy. Genghis Khan had issued specific orders. Each warrior received an allotted share of captives based on rank. Commanders got first choice. Common soldiers divided the rest. Quotas were enforced. Records were kept. A Mongol clerk sat at a wooden table marking numbers in a ledger while women were sorted 10 feet away. Aisha watched him write. He never looked up, not once. 3 months earlier, Aisha didn't know any of this was coming. Let me show you the world she's about to lose. She stood on her father's roof and watched a caravan arrive from China. Silk, jade, paper, spices, merchants speaking 6 languages, scholars debating philosophy in the streets. The Khwarezmian Empire stretched from India to the Caspian Sea, and Samarkand was its beating heart. Her father told her they were safe. The walls had never fallen. The Shah had 400,000 soldiers. What her father didn't tell her was this: the Shah had made a mistake, a fatal one. A year earlier, Mongol merchants had arrived at the border city of Otrar. The governor accused them of spying. He executed them all, 450 men, and seized their goods. Genghis Khan sent diplomats to demand justice. The Shah beheaded them. He shaved the beards of their companions and sent them back as a message. That message was received. What followed wasn't war, it was extermination. Genghis Khan assembled 100,000 to 150,000 warriors. He split them into columns that struck multiple cities simultaneously. The Shah's massive army, spread across 1,000 miles of border, couldn't respond to all of them. One by one, cities fell. Otrar, Bukhara, each one sent the same message forward: submit or be erased. The Shah fled. He would die alone on an island in the Caspian Sea, abandoned by everyone. And now the Mongols were here in Samarkand, in Aisha city, standing in that sorting line. Aisha remembered the caravan, the silk, the laughter 3 months ago, a lifetime ago. If these women deserve to be remembered, subscribe. Not for me, for them. Now, back to the sorting plaza. Back to a 16-year-old girl who had been married for 11 days. The second woman's name was Fatima. She was 16 years old. She had been married for 11 days. Her husband, Karim, was a carpet weaver. Not wealthy, not important. Just a young man who made beautiful things with his hands and loved a girl from the neighborhood. They were married on the first day of spring, a small celebration. Her mother wept with joy. Her father blessed them with verses from the Quran. 11 days. That's all they had. On the morning the walls fell, Karim kissed her forehead. "Stay hidden," he said. "I'll come back for you." He went to join the defense. She never saw him again. When the soldiers found her, she was hiding in a clay oven. The soldiers laughed when they pulled her out, covered in ash and soot. One of them grabbed her wrist, felt her hands, soft, young. "This one's clean," he said. "Recently married." Check her, an older woman, another captive, forced to assist, examined Fatima, virgin, she reported. Then, looking closer, no, recently taken. Very recently, the soldier smiled. Newlywed. The officers pay extra for those. Fatima was marked with a strip of blue cloth tied around her wrist. It meant she was reserved. Not for common soldiers. For someone with rank. She stood in line next to Aisha, 2 strangers who would never have met in the old world. A scholar's daughter and a weaver's bride. Aisha noticed she was shaking. "What's your name?" Aisha whispered. "Fatima." "I was married 11 days ago. Where's your husband?" "The walls." Aisha nodded. There was nothing else to say. Everyone's husbands, brothers, fathers were at the walls. The walls where 30,000 men had been executed in a single afternoon. Here's something the Chronicles don't explain clearly. The Mongols didn't just kill the soldiers. They made the women watch. It was deliberate, psychological. If you saw what happened to the men who resisted, you wouldn't resist. Fatima had seen. She'd been forced to stand at the edge of the plaza while the killing happened. Row after row of men, kneeling, throats cut with assembly line efficiency. She couldn't find Karim in the bodies. There were too many. They all looked the same after a while, just shapes in the dust. And here's the part that broke her. She felt relieved that she couldn't identify him, because if she'd seen his face, she would have screamed. And screaming meant selection for the third group, the group that didn't survive the night. So she stayed silent, she stayed small. She survived. That night a Mongol captain named Batu selected her for his personal tent. She was his reward for killing 47 defenders at the eastern gate. The number was recorded in a Mongol war ledger that would later be captured by Persian historians. 47 men, 1 girl. That was the exchange rate. The third woman made a choice that still haunts me. Her name was Soraya. She was 32 years old, a widow, a mother of 5. Her husband had been a merchant. He died of fever 2 years before the siege. She survived by selling bread in the market near the Friday mosque. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't educated. She was just a mother trying to keep her children alive in a city that was about to die. On the morning of the assault, she gathered her children in the cellar of her home. Jamshid, 14, Asan, Onsa, Ressa, 8, little Maryam, 5, and the baby, a boy with no name yet, only 3 months old. She wrapped the baby tight. She told the children to be silent. "We're playing a hiding game." She whispered to Maryam, "You must be very, very quiet." "Can you do that for Mama?" Maryam nodded. They hid for 2 days. On the second night, the baby started crying. Soraya pressed him to her breast, tried to quiet him. It wasn't enough. A soldier heard. They were dragged into the street, all 6 of them blinking in the harsh sunlight. A Mongol officer counted the children. His eyes stopped on the boys. 3 males. He said to his scribe, 1 female, 1 infant. He turned to Soraya. "The boys come with us." Khan's orders. All males between 8 and 15 are to be collected for training. Soraya's legs gave out. She fell to her knees in the dust. "Please," she begged. "They're all I have. My husband is dead. I have nothing else, please." And here's the detail that makes this story unbearable. The officer wasn't cruel. He wasn't laughing, he was tired. Just a man doing his job, processing the conquered, following orders. "If you surrender them willingly," he said quietly, "you keep the girl, you keep the infant, you work in a household, you survive." He paused. "If I take them by force, you all go to the market separately." The girl took the infant. He shrugged. Infants don't survive the march east. She had to choose. 3 sons who would be taken, converted, trained as Mongol warriors who might survive, grow up, become something, or 1 daughter and 1 infant who would stay with her. She chose. The next morning, Soraya walked to the processing center. She held Maryam's hand. The baby was strapped to her chest. Her 3 sons walked behind her. Jamshid was 14, old enough to understand. "Mama," he whispered, "don't do this. We can run. We can." "And there's nowhere to run." She didn't look at him. She couldn't. "This way. You live," she said, her voice empty. "You grow up. You become strong." And maybe someday. She couldn't finish. "I surrender my sons to the Khan's service," she told the officer. "In exchange, I keep my daughter and my infant." The officer made a note in his ledger. The boys were taken to the processing line. They would be converted to the Mongol faith, given new names, trained to fight for the empire that destroyed their home. Jamshid looked back once. His eyes asked a question she couldn't answer. She never saw any of them again. On the 6th day, the survivors were divided. Skilled workers, craftsmen, scholars, engineers were chained in coffles and marched east toward Mongolia, 1,200 miles across mountains, deserts, and frozen steppes. Aisha's father was among them. She learned this later, from a merchant who had seen the column pass through Bukhara. An old man, the merchant said, a scholar. He was talking to himself, reciting something. Poetry, I think, or prayers. Rahman died somewhere in the Taklamakan desert. His knowledge of astronomy, accumulated over a lifetime, died with him. The women faced different fates. The highest value captives, young, beautiful, skilled, were distributed among commanders. Aisha was given to a general named Jeeb, one of Genghis Khan's dogs of war, a man responsible for more death than most natural disasters. He didn't want her for her body. He wanted her for her languages. She spoke Persian, Arabic, and Turkic. She could read captured documents, translate surrenders, draft correspondence. She became his secretary, his interpreter, his property. It was better than what happened to Fatima. Fatima was passed through for owners in 3 months. The captain who first claimed her grew bored. He traded her to a fellow officer for 2 horses. That officer lost her in a dice game. The winner sold her to a merchant heading toward the slave markets of Buk. Each transaction was recorded. Each time her value decreased. Used goods, the merchants wrote, previously owned, suitable for domestic service. By the time she reached the market, she was worth less than a quality horse. She was sold to a Turkish household in what is now Afghanistan. She bore 3 children. She lived until 1267. She never spoke her husband's name again. Soraya and her remaining children were assigned to a household in the restructured city. The Mongols didn't destroy Samarkand completely. They needed it to function. They needed people to cook, clean, rebuild. So Soraya cooked. She cleaned. She raised Mariam in a house that wasn't hers, in a city that had been hers. Speaking a language she was forced to teach her daughter, Mariam grew up Mongol. She was given a new name, Altanit. She married a Mongol soldier at 14. She had children who never knew they had 3 uncles who might still be alive somewhere in the empire. Soraya lived until 1248. She was 60 years old. According to a testimony recorded by a Persian historian, she said one thing near the end of her life. "I pray my sons are alive. I pray they don't remember me, because if they remember, they suffer, and I have caused enough suffering." Here's what the bones tell us. In 1962, Soviet archaeologists began excavating Afrasiab, the ancient core of Sen. Layer by layer, they uncovered the destruction of 1220. They found charred walls, arrowheads embedded in gates, mass graves that confirmed what the Chronicles described. But one discovery changed everything. In a collapsed building near the old library district, they found a cache of silver coins, 847 of them, buried in haste, hidden by someone who never came back to retrieve them. The coins were dated to 1219. 1 year before the fall, someone had buried their savings. Someone had planned to survive. Someone didn't. Near the coins, they found bones. A woman, approximately 45 to 50 years old. Her skull showed blunt force trauma. She had been killed quickly. Beneath her skeleton, they found smaller bones. A child, approximately 4 to 5 years old. The positioning suggested she had been shielding the child when she died. The archaeologists spent 3 days excavating that single site. When they finished, the lead researcher Yuri Buzhakov sat in silence for a long time. Then he wrote one line in his field notebook: "A mother still protecting her child after 742 years. But here's the discovery that proves these women existed. In 2007, a restoration team at the Bibliothèque nationale de France was digitizing a 13th century Persian manuscript, a collection of astronomical observations attributed to scholars of the Khwarezmian Empire. When they enhanced the images, when they examined the margins under ultraviolet light, they found something. Scratched into the parchment, invisible to the naked eye, were names, not written, scratched, carved with something sharp, a pin, a fingernail by someone who wanted to leave a mark that couldn't be washed away. Aisha, Fatima, Soraya, Mariam, Zara, Leila, 17 names. And beneath them, in Persian so faint it took digital enhancement to read, "We were here." The manuscript had traveled from Samarkand to Baghdad to Cairo to Paris over 8 centuries. At some point, someone, perhaps a survivor, perhaps a descendant, had carved these names into its margins. They wanted someone to remember. For 800 years, no one did. Now you have. What happened to Aisha? We have fragments. A Persian chronicle mentions the daughter of Rahman the astronomer serving in a Mongol general's household until 1235. She would have been 35 years old. After that, nothing. She disappears from history. Another name that almost vanished. But she didn't vanish. She left something behind. Historians believe Aisha may have been the one who scratched those names into the manuscript. She was literate. She had access to documents. She knew the other women, and she understood something the Mongols didn't. You can take everything from people: their homes, their families, their children, their names, their language, their faith, but you cannot take what they choose to leave behind. A manuscript carried through centuries, names carved with a fingernail, one line in Persian that survived 800 years of silence: "We were here." These women didn't defeat the Mongol Empire. They didn't reclaim Samarkand. They didn't live to see freedom, but they refused to disappear. And 800 years later, in a Paris library, under ultraviolet light, their names rose from the darkness: Aisha, Fatima, Soraya. We were here. If this story stays with you, subscribe to the Obscure Chronicles, not for us, for them, for the women of Samarkand who were supposed to be erased. They're still here because you remembered.